The night Amara Brooks walked down that rain-soaked alley, she almost kept walking. She almost did the smart thing, the safe thing, and left a bleeding stranger to his fate. But something stopped her. Not bravery, not heroism, just a single word he whispered into the dark that she couldn't unhear. What she didn't know in that moment was that the man bleeding on that concrete wasn't just a stranger. He was the answer to a question her family had been living with for 5 years. And the second she stepped out of the shadows, 3 trained men turned around. A $40 billion conspiracy cracked open, and a 17-year-old girl from Chicago became the most dangerous loose end in the room. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The rain came down hard that night. Not the soft, forgiving kind that city people sometimes romanticize, but the cold, punishing kind that soaks through everything and finds every gap in your jacket. The kind that makes you want to be somewhere else. The kind that makes you keep your head down and your feet moving. Amara Brooks kept her head down. She was 17, and she had a 12-minute walk between the tutoring center on Meridian and her front door on Callaway Street. She had done this walk before. She knew which blocks were fine and which ones made her tighten her grip on her backpack straps. She knew the shortcut through the alley behind the Harrington District restaurants, the high-end strip with the glowing signs and the valets standing outside in matching jackets. The alley itself was nothing glamorous. Dumpsters, drainage pipes, service doors, the smell of kitchen grease, and wet concrete. But it cut 4 minutes off her walk, and her mother had a rule about being home before 9:30. It was 9:14. She turned into the alley. She heard it before she saw it. The dull, awful sound of something heavy connecting with flesh. Once. Twice. A grunt. Then nothing. Then again. She slowed her steps without meaning to. The way your body processes thread information a half-second before your brain does. She pressed herself against the alley wall and peered around the edge of a commercial dumpster. 3 men. One of them was large, the kind of large that wasn't accidental, that came from years of deliberate effort. He wore dark clothes, no markings, no logo, nothing memorable. The second was leaner, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had done this kind of thing before. The third stood slightly back, watching the entry points of the alley with his arms crossed, acting as a spotter. On the ground between them was a man. He was white, late 40s, wearing what had probably been an expensive suit before the last several minutes had happened to it. His jacket was torn. His face was turned away from her, but she could see the blood, a dark stain spreading across the wet concrete beneath his head, mixing with the rain and running in thin ribbons toward the drain. He was trying to lift himself. His arms kept failing. The large man crouched down and grabbed a fistful of the man's shirt. "You should have stayed buried," he said. His voice was flat, professional, not angry, which somehow made it worse. He hit him again. The man on the ground stopped trying to get up. Amara's stomach dropped. She should leave. Every logical part of her brain was running the same calculation. 3 men, coordinated, clearly not amateurs. No one else in this alley. No witnesses, no backup. She was 17 years old with a backpack full of calculus notes and a bus card. She should leave. She should turn around, walk back the way she came, call 911 from half a block away, and let the people whose job it was handle what was clearly way above her. She took 1 step back. Then the man on the ground turned his head slightly, eyes barely open, searching the darkness with whatever awareness he had left. His lips moved. Barely. She almost didn't hear it over the rain. "Please," he breathed. "My daughter." Amara stopped. She stood there in the rain with her back against the alley wall and her hand pressed flat against the wet brick, and she felt that word land somewhere deep in her chest where logic couldn't quite reach it. She looked at the 3 men again. Really looked. No masks. They weren't worried about being identified. No bags. They hadn't come to rob him. No arguments. No raised voices. None of the chaotic energy that came with a mugging or a street fight. They were calm. Coordinated. The spotter was checking his watch. They had a timeline. That was the thing that changed it for her. Not courage. Not heroism. Just that single observation. The spotter checking his watch. That told her something clean and awful. This wasn't random. This was scheduled. She set her backpack down against the wall. She rolled her left shoulder once, then her right. Old habit. She stepped out from behind the dumpster. "Leave him alone." Her voice came out even. She hadn't planned that. The large man turned first, then the lean one, then the spotter. All 3 clocking her at the same time, doing the same rapid assessment. 17-year-old girl in a damp school uniform. Backpack on the ground. Hands loose at her sides. The large man actually smiled. "Get out of here, little girl," he said, already turning back. I said, "Leave him alone." The lean one was the one who moved. He came at her the way people come at someone they don't consider a real threat. Fast, careless, one hand reaching out to shove her back or grab her by the collar, already looking past her toward the alley exit to make sure no one else had appeared. He was still looking past her when she moved. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't the kind of thing you see in action movies where someone flips through the air and lands in a crouch. It was small, precise, and brutally efficient. She turned her body 45 degrees as his arm came forward, let his momentum carry it past her, caught his wrist with both hands, and redirected it downward with a sharp, controlled rotation. His balance broke. He went forward. Her elbow came up and caught him across the back of the neck. Not hard enough to do permanent damage, but hard enough. He hit the concrete and stayed there, gasping. Elapsed time. 3 seconds. The alley went quiet. The large man and the spotter both stared at her. Not with anger yet. With something more like recalibration. The sudden, disorienting experience of a situation being different than anticipated. The large man took a step forward. She shifted her weight and squared her stance, just slightly, enough that anyone trained would recognize it immediately. The large man stopped. He was reading her now, really reading her, and something in what he saw made him pause. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't threaten or posture. She just waited. The spotter said something in a low voice, 2 words clipped and decisive. The large man looked at the lean, one still groaning on the ground, then back at Amara. He reached down, grabbed his partner's collar, and hauled him upright. The lean man was functional. Unsteady, but functional. He shrugged off the grip and straightened, and the look he gave Amara was cold in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. "This isn't over," he said. Then they walked, not ran, walked out of the alley. Unhurried, controlled, which was, again, the thing that unsettled her most. She listened to their footsteps until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then she turned and crossed to the man on the ground. She crouched beside him and pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. Pulse, present, reasonably steady. She moved to his wrist, same result. She tilted his head carefully and checked his airway. Breathing was labored, but continuous. His face was a mess. A cut above his left eye, swelling across his cheekbone, lower lip split, but he was conscious or near enough to it. His eyes found her face. He looked at her the way people look when they're trying to figure out if they're dreaming. She sat back on her heels and looked at him in return, doing her own assessment. Expensive watch, still on his wrist, so definitely not a robbery. His jacket had a small embroidered logo near the chest pocket that she couldn't quite read in the dark. His shoes were the kind that cost more than her mother's monthly utilities. His hands were soft except for a small callus pattern on his right palm, near the thumb, someone who spent a lot of time with a pen or a stylus or a grip of some kind. He didn't look like a man with enemies. But then, that was probably by design. "Who are you really?" she said quietly. He blinked, swallowed. "You just saved the wrong man," he said. His voice was rougher than it probably normally was, ragged around the edges from the blows. But there was something in the way he said it that wasn't self-pity. It was more like a warning. She heard it as a warning. In the distance, through the rain, she heard it, the faint, rising warble of sirens. Police. Someone must have reported a disturbance. The Harrington district was the kind of neighborhood where people called quickly and the response times were short. She stood up. He reached up and caught her wrist. His grip was weaker than he probably meant it to be. "Don't let them find you with me," he said. She looked at the alley exit, then back at him. She should leave. She had told herself that already. She should absolutely leave. She looked at the way the 3 men had walked out. Calm, unhurried, like they had somewhere to be next. Like this had been step 1 of something. "Can you stand?" she said. "I don't." "Can you stand?" she said again. Not a question this time. He tried. Failed. Tried again, and this time she put her arm under his and took the weight. He was heavy. She was strong. Between the 2 of them, they got him upright, and she steered them both toward the far end of the alley, the service exit side, away from the sirens, into the darker part of the district where the street lights were further apart and there were no valets watching. She kept moving. The storage unit was a 10-minute walk from the alley, which felt like a much longer distance when you were half-carrying a grown man through service lanes and parking structures in the rain. Amara didn't take the obvious route. She moved them through the less-watched corridors, the service road behind the parking deck on 5th, the underpass near the old freight loading area, the stretch of industrial block that most people didn't bother with because there was nothing they're worth stopping for. She moved like someone who had learned to read environments the way other people read text, scanning exits, noting cameras, calculating sightlines. Ethan Caldwell, whoever he was, said nothing during this. He was focused entirely on the task of staying upright. The storage facility was a low concrete building that had stopped being actively managed sometime in the last 2 years. Her uncle Raymond had rented space here for his landscaping equipment before he moved his business to another part of the city. When he left, he'd handed her the key with a vague gesture that meant he'd forgotten about it entirely. Amara had kept it. She had never been entirely sure why. Habit, maybe, or the same instinct that made her learn the back routes and note the cameras. She got the side door open and guided him inside. The unit itself was basic. Concrete floor, metal walls, a fluorescent strip light that flickered twice before it held. There was a folding workbench along one wall, a few storage crates, and a metal cabinet that still had some of Raymond's supplies in it. A box of disposable gloves, zip ties, utility tape, a first aid kit he had put together years ago and never opened. She sat Ethan down on one of the crates and opened the first aid kit. "Take off your jacket," she said. He did, slowly with effort. Underneath, his dress shirt was torn and there was bruising across his ribs, visible even through the fabric. She pulled on a pair of gloves and got to work. Cleaned the cut above his eye with antiseptic, applied pressure until the bleeding slowed, then closed it with 2 adhesive strips. Checked his fingers and wrists, no breaks she could feel. The ribs were a different matter. She pressed carefully along the sides. He made a sound. "Could be cracked," she said. "Not broken. You need to breathe through your nose and avoid deep inhalation until you get imaging." He looked at her. "You've done this before," he said. She didn't answer. She moved to the cut on his lower lip, cleaned it, decided it didn't need closing. The swelling on his cheekbone would have to resolve on its own. She checked his pupils, even responsive to the pen light she found in the kit. No obvious concussion symptoms beyond some disorientation, which could be chalked up to the shock of the whole situation. She stripped off the gloves and tossed them. She sat down across from him on the workbench and pulled out her phone. The notification was already there. She had felt her phone buzzing twice during the walkover and hadn't stopped to check it. She unlocked the screen now. The news alert was at the top. Breaking. Tech billionaire Ethan Caldwell reported missing following suspected attack in Harrington District. Sources say CEO has not been located. Police investigation ongoing. She read it once. Read it again. Then she looked up at the man sitting across from her with his torn shirt and taped eyebrow and held together ribs. He was watching her read it. He had been waiting for this moment. "Ethan Caldwell," she said. He didn't deny it. She set the phone down slowly on the workbench beside her. She felt the shift, not a dramatic one, not something that showed on her face, but internal. The quiet but significant recalibration that happens when you realize the situation you're in is a different size than you thought. She had helped a man in an alley. She had assumed he was probably a local, probably had ordinary enemies, a bad business deal, a personal dispute, something grounded in the world she understood. That was already more than she should have involved herself in. This was not that. Her phone kept buzzing. She turned the screen over. The news commentary was already dividing itself the way it always did. She had seen 2 headlines now. The first called him a visionary, one of the most significant technology figures of his generation, founder and CEO of Caldwell Technologies, a company worth somewhere north of $40 billion. The second called him something different. Aggressive business practices, a lawsuit from 3 years ago that had been settled quietly, allegations from former employees about a workplace culture that rewarded ruthlessness and buried dissent. 2 pictures of the same man. She looked at the actual man. "Some people seem to like you," she said. "Some don't. That's fairly standard at my level," he said. His voice was returning to something closer to normal, steadier, more controlled. Whatever he was under the business profile, he was not someone who fell apart easily. "The ones in the alley," she said. "They weren't random. No, they weren't there to rob you. No. So what were they there for?" He was quiet for a moment. She waited. She had learned early that impatience made people give you less, not more. "There's a situation inside my company," he said finally. "Something I uncovered. Money moving in ways it shouldn't. Decisions being made that weren't mine and weren't above board. I started documenting it. I made the mistake of not moving fast enough." He paused. "Someone found out I was documenting it. And they tried to fix the problem," she said. "They tried to fix the problem." She looked at his hands again. They were steadier now, but she could see the slight tension in the way he held them, the controlled stillness of someone keeping a rein on something larger. "You said someone inside your company," she said. "Not someone in general. Someone specific." "Yes." "You know who is?" He didn't answer, which was an answer. She crossed her arms. "So go to the police. Go to the FBI. You're Ethan Caldwell. You have resources. You have lawyers. You have every kind of protection a person can have. If they find me through official channels," he said, "the evidence disappears before a single warrant is filed. I have reason to believe that certain relationships have been built with people who could make that happen. He looked at her steadily. I'm not being paranoid. I'm describing a situation I have watched someone build over several years. She didn't respond to that immediately. He asked, where did you learn to fight like that? She shifted on the workbench. That's not what we're talking about. You took down a trained adult in about 3 seconds. You navigated us here through what I'm guessing was a deliberately unchosen route to avoid surveillance. You treated my injuries without flinching, and you knew exactly what you were doing. He paused. That's not a normal skill set for a 17-year-old. She looked at him. She didn't say anything for a moment. What came back to her instead of words was an image. A gym that smelled like rubber mats and chalk, with water-stained ceiling tiles and a speed bag in the corner that had been duct-taped back together twice. A man standing over her while she ran through forms on tired legs, his voice low and precise. Again, slower. You're thinking about the end. Think about the now. Her father. She shut down. My father trained me, she said. Leave it there. He seemed to understand that was the boundary, because he didn't push. But something shifted in his expression when she said it. Barely there, the smallest interior reaction, gone before she could classify it. She noticed it. She filed it. You said I saved the wrong man, she said. I did say that. What did you mean by it? He was quiet for a long moment. The fluorescent light hummed above them. The rain outside had softened into a general drizzle against the metal roof. I've made decisions in my career that I'm not proud of, he said. I've also uncovered things that others in my industry don't want uncovered. Both of those things are true simultaneously. I'm not asking you to make a judgment about who I am. He met her eyes. I'm telling you that helping me comes with consequences I can't fully predict, and you should understand that. She held his gaze. People don't try to kill you for nothing, she said. He didn't deny it. She stood up and walked to the metal cabinet and stood there with her back to him for a moment, working through it. She was aware, with a clarity that surprised her, of exactly what she was looking at. She was 17. She had school in the morning. She had a mother who was going to be upset about the hour. She had a life that, while not uncomplicated, was hers, with its own structure and its own forward motion. She was looking at the door to a different world. She turned around. I'm not agreeing to anything, she said. I'm not your security detail, and I'm not your partner. You need to rest for a few hours. In the morning, we figure out what your next step is and whether I'm any part of it. She looked at him squarely. But I'm not running from whatever this is just because it's big. I stopped being afraid of big things a long time ago. He looked at her. How old are you? He said. Not condescendingly. More like genuine calculation. Old enough to have pulled you out of an alley tonight, she said. Get some sleep. She went back to the workbench. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but the exhaustion was winning. He leaned back against the wall, carefully protecting his ribs. Within a few minutes his breathing had evened out. She sat in the thin light and looked at the news on her phone. More stories were accumulating now. Commentators speculating about foul play, about rivals, about stress. A few were already building a different narrative, one that framed his disappearance as something he had constructed himself. His partner was quoted. She read the name twice. Victor Hale, co-founder and chief operating officer of Caldwell Technologies, stated this evening that the company remains stable and fully operational, and urged anyone with information regarding Mr. Caldwell's whereabouts to contact authorities immediately. She read it again. Then Ethan's phone lit up on the floor beside him. She hadn't noticed it before. It must have been in his inside jacket pocket. It was a secondary device, small and matte black, not the kind of phone that came with a carrier contract. The screen showed a single incoming message. She couldn't read the full text from where she was sitting, but she could read the top line in the preview. Phase 2 begins. Target still alive. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Ethan Caldwell, asleep against the wall of her uncle's old storage unit, with his taped eyebrow and his cracked ribs and his $40 billion company and his enemies who moved on a schedule. And she thought about the man in the alley, calm, professional, checking his watch. Phase 2. She put her phone face down on the workbench. She wasn't running from whatever this was, but she understood now, fully, what she was not running from. Morning came the way it always does after a bad night. Indifferent, unhurried, the thin gray light pressing under the gap at the bottom of the storage unit's side door before Amara had properly slept. She had not properly slept. She had sat on a workbench for most of the night with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up, drifting in and out of shallow, unsatisfying rest while her mind kept returning to the same point. Phase 2 begins. Target still alive. Whoever sent that message knew the first attempt had failed, which meant they would correct the failure, which meant the clock had already restarted. Ethan was awake before 6. She heard his breathing change, the careful, controlled shift of someone with damaged ribs trying to sit upright without making a sound. He made a sound anyway. "Don't use your arms to push up," she said. "Roll to your side first." He adjusted. Better. She handed him a bottle of water from the cabinet. Raymond had kept a flat of them, half of which were still sealed, and watched him drink. "How long was I out?" he asked. 5, 6 hours. He looked at the secondary device. She could tell from the way his eyes went straight to it that he already knew about the message. Either he had seen it before he slept, or he had expected something like it. "You read it," he said. It was face up on the floor. He didn't look bothered by that. He looked like a man checking a box he had already mentally prepared for. "Then you understand what today looks like. Tell me anyway." He set the water down. "They have resources and they have patience. They'll pull security footage from the district. They'll run plates on every car near the alley. They'll talk to people. They're not sloppy." He paused. "They'll find the general area within hours. They'll narrow it further by midday." She thought about the route she had taken, the underpass, the parking deck, the industrial block. No cameras she had noticed. But she had been moving fast in the rain, at night, with half her attention on keeping him upright. She hadn't been perfect. "Then we move before midday," she said. "Move where?" She was already thinking about that. She stood up and pulled on her jacket and went to the side door and opened it 2 inches. The alley behind the storage building was empty. A delivery truck idled at the far end of the block, driver eating something in the cab. Nothing else moving. She scanned the roof lines, the parked vehicles, the gap between the buildings across the service road. Then she saw it. A black SUV, parked on the street that ran parallel to the back of the building, visible through the gap between the storage facility and the auto repair shop next to it. It was parked legally, engine off, but the windshield was tinted and she had been staring at that gap for 20 seconds and not seeing a single movement from inside. No phone check, no shift in the driver's position, no one getting out to get coffee. Just stillness. People who park legally and sit completely still for 20 seconds are either asleep or working. She closed the door. "We have a problem," she said. Ethan looked at her. Black SUV, parallel street, northeast gap. "It's been still since I opened the door." She moved back to the workbench and picked up her backpack, still there from the night before, still damp. "They're not the same ones from the alley. It's too fast for them to have run the footage and responded already. Which means there was already a second team. A follow-up." He absorbed this. They planned for failure. They planned for everything. She watched his face move through a rapid internal process. The kind of calculation that probably happened in boardrooms when strategy fell apart and you had about 30 seconds to build a new one. She gave him credit for speed. "There's a back exit to this unit," she said. "Where does it come out?" "Service road on the south side. Runs behind the auto shop and connects to the freight lane at the bottom of the block." He was already getting to his feet, careful and controlled. He picked up his jacket. "Lead." She went first. The back exit was a fire door with a push bar. She had identified it the previous night and checked that it wasn't alarmed. She eased it open and they stepped into the narrow service corridor between the storage building and the neighboring structure. She moved them along the wall, close to the brick, out of the sight line of anyone watching from the parallel street, through the freight lane, across the back of the auto shop's parking area, and out onto a side street 2 blocks south of where the SUV was sitting. She kept her pace even. Normal. 2 people walking, not fleeing. Ethan matched her pace without being told to. They were half a block gone when she heard the sound behind them, a car door. Then another. She didn't turn around. She kept walking, steered them left at the corner, then immediately right into a narrow residential passage between 2 apartment buildings. "Keep moving," she said quietly. "Don't look back." They came out the other side onto a wider residential street. Foot traffic. A woman walking a dog. 2 men heading toward a bus stop. Normal morning density. She slotted them into it, adjusted their pace to match the crowd, and let 40 seconds pass before she exhaled. "They were inside faster than you thought," Ethan said. Not accusing, just noting. "Yes," she said. She pulled them into the entryway of a laundromat that hadn't opened yet and stood back from the window. Through the glass, she watched the street. 30 seconds. A minute. No SUV. No figures moving against the pedestrian flow. She turned to look at him. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't fully classify, something between assessment and something more complicated. He had been doing that since the alley, watching her in a way that felt less like gratitude and more like recognition. "You move like you've done this before," he said. "Not just training, experience." She said nothing. "Who trained you?" he asked. Directly this time, not sliding up to it. She looked at him for a moment. "My father," she said, same as last night. "And who was your father?" She felt the edge of the question, the specific way he had phrased it, Not what did he do, but who was he? Like there was a particular answer he was testing against something. He was someone who believed in being prepared, she said. He used to say, always see the second threat. Something moved across Ethan's face. Quick, control, gone. But she had seen it. You've heard that before, she said. It's a fairly common philosophy in certain circles, he said. Carefully. She held his gaze. He held hers. Neither of them filled the silence with anything useful. Tell me about the money, she said. You said billions were moving. Moving where? To who? He shifted back into the harder, more comfortable territory of facts. He told her what he knew, that over the past 18 months, internal transfers had been routed through a series of subsidiary entities that existed on paper and nowhere else. The amounts were not petty. They were structural, the kind of movement that suggested someone wasn't embezzling for personal gain, but building something parallel. A second operation, funded by the first, invisible to the board and to regulators because the people who should have been watching had been systematically replaced or compromised. By one person, she said. By one person, he confirmed. Hale. He looked at her. She had read the name in the news quote the previous night and filed it. He understood now that she had already been putting it together. Victor Hale, he said. My co-founder. We built the company together. I was the product. He was the infrastructure. He paused. I should have paid more attention to the infrastructure. Where's the evidence? Hidden. Off-site. Secured. He looked at her steadily. I put it somewhere before the attack. I was on my way to retrieve it when they found me. So they knew your timeline. Yes. She thought about that. Someone inside his company. Close enough to know his schedule, his route, his plan. Not just complicit. Central. We can't stay in this doorway, she said. Where are we going? She was still working that out. She needed somewhere with cover, with space, without cameras, where she could think properly. She had a few options. None of them were ideal. I know a place, she said. She took them east, deeper into the residential side of the district, away from anything that might attract corporate security teams, away from hotels, transit hubs, anything with a functional camera grid. She was rebuilding the map in her head as she walked, adjusting for the new information, the second team, the speed of their response. They were better resourced than she had initially estimated. She upgraded her caution level accordingly. They found out they were looking for her 2 hours later. She had risked turning her phone back on, briefly, on airplane mode, just to check, and found 6 missed calls from her mother and a text from her friend Destiny that said simply, Girl, somebody was watching you outside school yesterday. Like actually watching. You good? She stared at the text. She put the phone back on airplane mode and turned to Ethan, who was sitting across from her in the back corner of an empty community rec room she had accessed through a broken side panel. A shortcut she had known about for 2 years and never used for anything except occasionally eating lunch in peace. They know about me, she said. How? Street camera from the alley, probably, or the storage block. She kept her voice level. My school is being watched. He said nothing for a moment. She watched him process the guilt. It was there, real and unguarded, the first fully unguarded thing she had seen from him. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be sorry, she said. Be useful. Tell me what we're dealing with. He told her more. The operation Hale had been building was not just financial. There were people on the operational side, contractors, teams, individuals with specific skill sets who had been quietly retained over several years. Not a corporation's normal security apparatus. Something built alongside it, under different budget lines, different names. He built a private capability, she said. That's a clean way to put it, Ethan said. And these people, the ones in the alley, the SUV this morning, they're part of that. Yes. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The rec room smelled like old wood and cleaning fluid. Somewhere outside a kid was bouncing a basketball with the irregular rhythm of someone who hadn't found their groove yet. She thought about Destiny's text. Somebody was watching you outside school. They had identified her and moved within hours. That was fast. That was very fast. She thought about what that meant. What it meant that somewhere right now, someone with resources and no particular restraint had her image and was working on a name and an address. Her mother's address. She sat up straight. I have to go home, she said. That's the most watched location you could go to right now. Ethan said immediately. I know. She was already standing. I'm not going in. I just need to see it. Check. He looked like he wanted to argue. He looked at her face and didn't. They moved. She went the long way around. Callaway Street from the west approach, past the laundromat on the corner and the Haitian bakery that had been there since before she was born, cutting through the small parking area behind the church so she could see the street from the side without being on it. She posted herself against the church's brick wall and looked. The street looked normal. Her mother's building, 3 stories, brick, the window box on the second floor with the half-dead herbs that her mother kept insisting would recover. Looked normal. People moving in and out of the building next door. The usual morning rhythm of the block. Then she found it. A gray sedan, different plates from the SUV, parked on the opposite side of the street with a sightline directly to her building's front entrance. The driver's window was cracked. Engine off. Nobody getting out. She had been on this street every day of her life, and she knew every car that belonged here. That one did not. She pulled back. She stood with her back against the church wall and breathed steadily and felt 17 years old in a way she had not felt since the night before. Not frightened, just aware of the full weight of it. Her street, her mother's window, the half-dead herbs. She went back to where she had left Ethan waiting. A parking structure 2 blocks over, 3rd level, the corner with the broken gate sensor that meant the cameras up there had been offline for at least 6 months. She had checked that 3 weeks ago for an entirely unrelated reason and stored the information the way her father had taught her to store everything. Not because you need it now, but because you might. Her father. She kept coming back to that. The way Ethan's face had moved when she said, always see the second threat. The careful way he had said it was a common philosophy in certain circles. She was going to push on that. Tonight. But not yet. Someone's watching my building, she told Ethan. I expected that. I didn't say I didn't expect it. I'm telling you because it changes our timeline. She sat down on the concrete barrier at the edge of the structure's top level. The city spread out below them, morning in full effect now, ordinary and indifferent. My mother is in there. He was quiet. She goes to work at 8:30, Amara said. Takes the same route. She's predictable because she's never had a reason not to be. She looked at her hands. I made her a target by being in that alley. You made her a target by being good enough to intervene, Ethan said. That's different, is it? He didn't answer that. Fair. She needed to think about her mother without thinking about her mother, which was the only way she had ever managed to stay functional when the people she loved were inside a problem. Compartmentalize. Assess. Act. Her mother would leave for work. The car outside was watching the building, not following individuals, too obvious. As long as her mother moved normally, didn't know anything was wrong, didn't do anything that flagged her as significant, she was probably fine for today. Probably. She pulled out her phone, still on airplane mode. She switched it on just long enough to send a single text to her mother. Running late this AM, going straight to school. Love you. She switched it off again. Her mother would be annoyed. That was manageable. I need to get into my house, she said. Why? She thought about the room. Her room. The training gear in the duffel under the bed. The hand wraps, the compression gear, the items she would need if this extended past today, the way she was starting to understand it would. And the other things. The things she had never quite been able to throw away. Because I have things I need, she said. And because I need to understand something. She went in through the back. The building had a service entrance off the alley that was technically locked, but could be opened with a specific angled pressure on the lower corner of the door. Something that had been true since the year the building super had replaced the lock mechanism incorrectly and never fixed it. She had discovered this at 14 and told no one, the way you hold on to small structural secrets about the places where you live. She took the stairs, not the elevator. Listened at the 3rd floor landing. Her mother's voice, faintly, through the apartment door. On the phone, probably, the morning routine. She checked the time. 6 minutes before she usually left. She waited in the stairwell. She heard the apartment door open. Footsteps. The elevator. Gone. She let a full minute pass. Then she went down the hall and let herself in with her key, moving quickly, no lights. She went straight to her room. It was exactly as she had left it, which was to say, curated. The things on the surface were ordinary. Textbooks. A corkboard with a class schedule and a photo of her and Destiny from last summer. A charging cable. The things that showed a normal teenage life, which it largely was most of the time. She got on her knees and pulled the duffel from under the bed. Inside, hand wraps already wound. A mouthguard in a case. Compression leggings and a long-sleeve workout top. 2 protein bars she had forgotten about. She checked them, still good. A small flat case containing a USB drive and 2 folded sheets of paper that she had never fully understood but had kept because they were the last things her father had given her before he disappeared. She held the USB drive in her palm for a moment. Her father had pressed it into her hand when she was 12, 5 years ago. He had not explained it. He had said, if something happens to me, and someone you trust asks for this, you'll know. Don't open it yourself. Don't lose it. She had carried it in various forms since then, currently in the duffel, because she couldn't carry it on her person every day, but close enough. She put the duffel together and added what she needed from her closet: a change of clothes, a jacket, her emergency cash from the small compartment in the back of her desk drawer. She was moving fast now, efficient, the way she had been trained to move when time mattered. She stopped at the desk. There was a photo tucked into the back of the corkboard behind a class schedule, not visible from the doorway. She had put it there on purpose. Not hidden exactly, but private. She took it out. Her father in the photo was maybe 35, standing in a gym. He was in a plain gray t-shirt, mid-instruction, hands adjusting someone's stance. She was cropped out of the frame, 13-year-old Amara, visible only as an elbow at the edge. He looked direct, focused, the kind of man who occupied space without performing it. His face was half-turned from the camera. She had shown this photo to almost no one. She had thought about why she kept it half-hidden, and the honest answer was that she still wasn't entirely sure what her father was, what he had been. He had trained her the way you train someone for the world to be dangerous. He had taught her to see second threats and map exits and read people's weight distribution before they moved. He had never fully explained why. And then he had disappeared. Not died, disappeared. Her mother's explanation, delivered once and then sealed. He had to go. Some situations don't have clean endings, Amara. You love your father and you move forward. She had moved forward. She had kept training. She had carried the USB drive. She put the photo in the duffel and left. Ethan was where she had left him. She handed him one of the protein bars without commentary. He took it. She sat down across from him and opened the duffel and took out the training gear and began winding her hand wraps. Not because she was about to train, but because the physical rhythm of it helped her think, and she had been carrying questions for the past 12 hours that were overdue for direct delivery. You've been remembering something since I mentioned my father, she said, eyes on the wrap. It started last night when I said, always see the second threat. Something moved on your face and you shut it down. He was quiet. I don't have patience for the slow version right now, she said. My school is being watched, my building is being watched, and we're sitting in a parking structure eating protein bars. Whatever you're holding, you need to give it to me. He looked at her for a long moment. What's your father's name? He asked. Why? Because there's a name connected to a situation from 7 years ago, he said carefully, and I need to know if I'm right before I say something that can't be unsaid. She stopped winding. Marcus Brooks, she said. The effect was immediate. Not dramatic. He didn't flinch or look away. But something settled in him, the way a calculation settles when the final number confirms what you suspected. It was the stillness of confirmation. You knew him, she said. I knew of him, Ethan said. There's a difference. I never met him directly, but I knew his name. I knew his work. What work? Ethan was careful, precise. There was a security unit, not affiliated with any government body officially. A private contracted group that operated for high-level corporate clients in situations that required what you might call operational discretion. Not a public firm. Deeply covert. The people in it were the best available. She was very still. Your father was one of the best in that unit, Ethan said. By reputation, by record. He was known for precision and for judgment. Specifically, for being someone who maintained a line that others in his field frequently crossed. What line? The line between neutralizing a threat and eliminating a person. She processed that. 7 years ago, Ethan said there was a job connected to someone who had obtained evidence of financial and operational misconduct at a significant level. The job, as it was defined by whoever authorized it, was to prevent that evidence from reaching the public. He paused. Your father refused. The parking structure was very quiet. He refused, and within days he was gone, she said. Yes. And the authorization for what happened to him, she said. Where did that come from? Ethan met her eyes. I don't know the full chain. I've been trying to establish it. Part of what I was documenting, the reason I'm in this position right now, connects to that operation. The same name appears at the edge of multiple things it shouldn't appear in. Hale, she said. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it. She set down the hand wrap. She looked at him. This man in his expensive torn shirt with his taped eyebrow and his $40 billion and his 7-year-old secrets, and felt the full complicated reality of the last 24 hours land on her at once. You should have said something last night, she said. I wasn't certain last night. You weren't certain or you weren't ready. He held her gaze. Both, he said. Honestly, both. She stood up. She walked to the edge of the parking structure and stood looking at the city and breathed. In through the nose, measured the way she had been taught. Out slow. Her father had not disappeared. Her father had been removed because he had refused to do something wrong. And the chain that led to that removal ran through a company that she was now, somehow, standing inside the edges of. She thought about her mother. Her mother, who had said some situations don't have clean endings and then never spoken of it again. Her mother, who had raised her alone and asked no questions about the training and the duffel under the bed and the USB drive that lived with it. Her mother knew. Not everything, but something. She turned back. "You probably shouldn't help me," Ethan said. He said it plainly, without drama. "Given what I just told you, you have every reason to walk away. You owe me nothing. Less than nothing." She looked at him. "Why should I help you?" she said. "You probably shouldn't," he said again. She thought about that. She thought about the men in the alley, coordinated and calm, and the spotter checking his watch, and phase 2 begins. She thought about the gray sedan outside her building and Destiny's text about someone watching the school and her mother leaving for work at 8:30 along the same route she always took. Predictable, because she had never had reason not to be. This wasn't about Ethan Caldwell anymore. It hadn't been about Ethan Caldwell since she saw that sedan on her street. "I'm not helping you," she said. "I'm protecting my family. You're just useful to that end." She picked up the duffel. "And I want to know everything about that operation. Everything. Not the version you're comfortable giving me. Everything." She looked him squarely in the eyes. "And then we figure out how to end this." He nodded once. The simple, clean nod of someone who had just been told the terms and accepted them. Neither of them said anything else. In the distance, barely audible, Amara's phone buzzed once from inside the duffel. Airplane mode off for just long enough. She opened it. A text from a number she didn't recognize. No words. Just a photo. Her mother, walking out of the building on Callaway Street, heading to work. Taken from across the street. This morning, sharp and clear. The message underneath, "Stay out of it." She looked at the photo for a long moment. Her mother's familiar coat. The slight way she tilted her head down into the wind. She closed the message. She put the phone away. "We need to move," she said. "Now." She gave him until they were moving again before she pushed. They had left the parking structure on foot, heading northeast through the residential grid, away from the commercial corridors where cameras were densest. Amara kept them at a walking pace, not rushed, not slow, two people going somewhere with ordinary purpose. She had changed into the clothes from her duffel in the stairwell before they left. Dark compression leggings, a long-sleeve top, the gray jacket over it. She had her hand wraps in her right pocket. She did not know exactly why. Old habit. Her father had taught her that the difference between prepared and unprepared was mostly just what you decided to keep within reach. Her father. She let half a block pass in silence. Then she said it. "You knew my father. Don't lie to me." Ethan kept walking. He did not look at her immediately, and she let the silence sit because she had learned the difference between a man thinking and a man stalling, and this was closer to thinking. She gave him the space for it. "Once. I told you what I knew," he said finally. "You told me the edges," she said. "You gave me outline. I want the inside." Another half block. The morning had warmed slightly. The overnight rain had cleared and left the streets with that particular washed-out brightness that made everything look more exposed than usual. She felt exposed. She kept her shoulders level and her pace even and felt it anyway. "Tell me his name," Ethan said. "Say it again." "You know his name. Say it anyway." She looked at him. "Marcus Brooks." And something in Ethan Caldwell shifted. Not broke, not collapsed, but settled, the way a building settles into its foundation when the last bolt is tightened. The way a man looks when the thing he's been carrying finally touches the ground. "Marcus Brooks," he repeated, quietly, like the name had weight in his mouth that it hadn't had in hers. "You didn't just know of him," she said. "That's not what that face is." He exhaled slowly. "No," he said, "not just of him." She waited. 7 years ago, he said, "I was at a different point in my life. The company was growing faster than I could manage cleanly. I was making decisions I let other people frame for me because the speed of it, the scale of it, meant I was always moving forward and never fully stopping to look at what I was moving through." He paused. Victor Hale managed the operational side. He always had. From the beginning, he was the one who handled the parts of the business that I preferred not to examine too closely. "That's a very clean way to describe negligence," she said. He accepted that without argument. "Yes, it is. Keep going." "There was a project," he said. "Internal name. I won't use it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it generated documentation. Financial records, communications, contracts, evidence of things that should not have been done. A former employee had obtained access to some of that documentation and was in the process of taking it to a regulatory body." He kept his eyes forward. "Hale came to me. He said the situation needed to be managed. He used that word, managed. And you said," Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I said I didn't want to know the specifics." She let that sit. "Which meant you gave him permission without having to say yes," she said. "Yes," he said. And the single syllable was flat and final and carried nothing that sounded like excuse. The person managing the situation was my father, she said. The unit Hale contracted was the one your father was part of, Ethan said. I don't know if Marcus was specifically assigned or if he chose the job. I know he was there. I know he was given the parameters of what Hale wanted done. He stopped walking for just a moment, half a step, then resumed. And I know he refused. He refused to eliminate the whistleblower, she said. Yes. And then he was gone. Within 3 days, Ethan said. I didn't connect the timeline immediately. I told myself a number of things. That he had left the unit. That the situation had resolved another way. I didn't need to look at it. His voice was steady, and she hated how steady it was, because steadiness was easier than what she was feeling. I was wrong to not look at it. I was wrong before that. I was wrong in several directions for a period of years, and your father paid for one of those directions. She stopped walking. They were on a residential side street. No one around, a dog barking somewhere in a yard behind a fence. She stood on the pavement and looked at this man, 40-something, intelligent, composed, standing in a torn shirt with a taped eyebrow in the middle of an ordinary street, and felt the full shape of it. The man she had pulled out of an alley. The man who had said you saved the wrong man like a warning she should have taken seriously. She said, you had him killed. I gave permission for something I didn't name, he said, which is the same thing, and I know it. Say it. He met her eyes. I'm responsible for what happened to your father. I didn't give the direct order. Hill did that, but I created the conditions. I said I didn't want to know, and I walked away, and that is the same as saying yes. He held her gaze. I know that. I have known that. She turned and walked 4 steps away from him and stood with her back to him, staring at the fence across the street where the dog had gone quiet. She had spent 5 years not knowing. 5 years of a mother who never answered the real question. A USB drive she wasn't supposed to open, a photo kept behind a class schedule on a corkboard. 5 years of training harder and harder as if skill could fill in for the answer she didn't have. Here was the answer. She felt the anger, clean, complete, running through her like a current. She did not shout. She did not cry. She breathed through her nose, measured, slow, the way she had been taught. In, out. Control is not the absence of feeling. Control is what you do with it. She turned back around. You're not going to ask me to forgive you, she said. No, he said. Good. She started walking again. He fell in a step beside her after a moment. She did not look at him. Victor Hale, she said. He authorized the order on my father. I believe so. What I've been documenting, the financial movement, the parallel operation. Hale's name appears in connection with multiple eliminations over the years. Not just Marcus. Your father was one of several people who were removed because they knew too much or refused to cooperate. He paused. That is part of what is in the data I secured. The full pattern. Names, dates, authorizations. And Hale knows you have it. He knows I had it when the attack happened. He doesn't know if I transferred it before they reached me. Did you? It's locked in an offsite server, he said. Secured under a separate identity, separate access protocol. They can't get to it without me, and I can't retrieve it remotely. I need to be physically at the location. She absorbed that. So the data is safe but inaccessible. Until I get to it. And if Hale finds you before that happens, then the data stays buried and he controls the narrative. She thought about the photo on her phone. Her mother in her familiar coat, head tilted into the wind, walking to work. Sharp and clear. Taken from across the street. Stay out of it. She almost laughed at that. She was about as far inside it as a person could get. There's something else, she said. My father. When he left, he gave me something. She didn't reach for the duffel. Not yet. A USB drive. He told me if someone I trusted asked for it, I'd know. Don't open it myself. Don't lose it. Ethan looked at her. The expression on his face was careful, and she could not fully read it. Do you know what's on it? She asked. No, he said. But I can guess. Guess. Marcus was meticulous. If he walked away from a job and understood what the consequences would be, he would have documented what he knew before he left. Names. Operations. Evidence he had access to as part of his work. He looked at her steadily. That drive might be the one piece of this that Hale never accounted for. She processed that. That's why you said I saved the wrong man, she said. You knew, if anyone ever connected you to me, that the connection would eventually lead back to this. I said it because it was true, he said. You should have walked past that alley. My father wouldn't have, she said. Ethan said nothing. She looked ahead. The street opened up onto a wider road, and she could see the skyline from here, clean against the morning blue, the towers of the business district sharp and indifferent. Somewhere in that skyline was a data facility with Ethan's secured files. Somewhere in a building she couldn't see, Victor Hale was giving orders and managing narratives and checking on the progress of Phase 2. And her mother was walking to work along the same route she always took. She felt the fear then, real cold, the kind that lives in the chest, and she let it exist for exactly 3 seconds, and then she filed it. "I'm not walking away," she said. "I know," he said, "and I'm not doing this for you. I know that too." She glanced at him sideways. "But I need you sharp, not managing me, not protecting me from information. Everything you know, you tell me as you know it." "Agreed," he said. "Then let's figure out how to get to your data before Hale figures out where we are." They found the journalist first. Ethan had a contact, a woman named Claire Dawson, an investigative reporter who had been building a story on Caldwell Technologies for the better part of a year. She was not a friend. She was someone who had been trying to get him on record for months about the internal financial irregularities, and he had declined every approach, which meant she had the framework of the story and none of the proof, and she had every reason to want what he could now offer. He reached her through an encrypted messaging application accessed through the dark browser on the secondary device, the matte black phone that had been in his inside jacket pocket since the alley. The exchange was brief and professional, the way exchanges are when both parties understand exactly what each has that the other needs. "I have what you've been looking for. I need 48 hours. Do not publish anything until I make contact. When I do, release everything immediately." Her response came back in under 4 minutes. "Understood. Clock starts now. 48 hours. Amara looked at the message over his shoulder and did the calculation. It was tight. It was very tight. But it changed their position. They were no longer purely reactive. They had a detonator now. Something that would go off with or without them, as long as Claire Dawson held her end. "She'll hold," Ethan said, reading the question on her face. "She's been working this story for a year. She's not going to blow it. People make bad calls under pressure. So do we," he said. "It's still our best option." She accepted that and moved on. The data facility was in the outer industrial ring of the city, not the glamorous kind of industrial, not converted lofts and artisan coffee, but the original kind, low buildings with loading bays, security fencing, signage that told you nothing about what was actually inside. Ethan knew the location by memory. He explained the layout as they walked. A single-story structure behind a perimeter fence, key card access at the main gate, a biometric secondary checkpoint inside the entrance, then a corridor to the server room, which required a second biometric scan and a 16-digit access code. "How many people know the access code?" she asked. "One," he said. "Me. And the biometric?" "Retinal and palm." He held up his right hand. The callus pattern she had noticed in the alley, the one she had read as pen or stylus. "Palm scanner," she understood now. "As long as I'm physically present, I can get in." "Security staff?" "2 on site at any time. Rotation every 8 hours. They're contracted through a separate firm, not affiliated with Caldwell Technologies." He paused. "They shouldn't know who I am by face. The facility operates under a registered identity that doesn't connect to me publicly." She noted the shouldn't. "But Hale knows about the facility. He knows about the financial structure I used to set it up. Whether he has the specific address." Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. I've been trying to calculate how much he knows. The answer is probably more than I want it to be. So we operate as if he has the address," she said. "We treat it as compromised and we move fast." Agreed. They needed to wait for dark. That left them several hours and the problem of her mother. She went to check on her at noon. Not to the building. She wasn't going to Callaway Street again while the gray sedan was there. But her mother had a lunch break between 12:15 and 1, and she always spent it at the same diner 2 blocks from her office, the one with the red awning and the booth in the back corner that she claimed had the best sight lines in the city, a preference she had developed without ever explaining why. Amara had always found that interesting, her mother's instinctive preference for sight lines. She posted herself across the street from the diner at 12:10 and watched the entrance. Her mother arrived at 12:17, alone, moving at her normal pace, nothing in her body language that suggested awareness or alarm. She disappeared inside. Amara watched the street. No tail she could identify. No parked vehicles out of place. Either they had pulled back from her mother specifically, focusing their resources on the more active search, or they were watching from a distance she couldn't detect. Neither option was fully comfortable, but the first was more likely. They wanted leverage. You didn't use leverage if you damaged it. She slipped into the diner through the side entrance. Her mother looked up from the booth when Amara slid into the seat across from her, and her face did the thing it always did, a rapid layering of emotion, working through them in order. Surprise, relief, concern, then the controlled expression that meant she was deciding how to respond. "You look like you haven't slept," her mother said. I'm Phoenix. Amara, I need you to change your route home tonight, she said quietly. And tomorrow, take the long way, through the community center, past the library, not the direct route. She held her mother's eyes. Don't ask me why right now. Just do it. Her mother was still. The kind of still that Amara recognized from training. The stillness of someone who already knew the shape of a situation and was deciding how much of that knowledge to show. How long has this been going on? Her mother asked. 2 days. Are you safe? Yes. Are you being careful? Always. Her mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over Amara's, briefly, firmly, and said nothing, which meant she understood, which meant she had always understood something about the possibility of a day like this, even if she had never said so. The long way home, Amara said. The long way, her mother agreed. Amara left the way she came. They went in at 11:15 that night. The outer perimeter fence had a service gate on the east side that Ethan knew was on a separate power circuit from the main entrance, a redundancy measure that also meant it could be isolated from the primary security panel. He talked her through the panel access point while she worked it with a small insulated tool from the repair kit she had found in the storage building the previous night and added to the duffel because her father had taught her that you always picked up useful things when you found them. The gate opened. They moved across the outer yard to the building entrance. Low light, gravel underfoot, the distant sound of highway traffic. Amara counted the camera positions as they went. 2 exterior, fixed angles covering the main approach. They went around the long way, using the loading bay shadow. At the entrance, Ethan used his keycard. The door opened. Inside, a corridor, fluorescent lit, institutional. A desk at the far end with a guard who looked up from his screen when they came in. Young guy, mid-20s, more accustomed to quiet nights than operational situations. Amara had already assessed him before she cleared the doorway. Not a threat. Not trained for this. He would ask questions, and she needed to not be memorable. Ethan stepped forward and spoke to him with the particular quiet authority of someone who had spent decades in rooms where they were the most important person present. Not aggressive, not loud, just settled. He gave a name, a company identity, a reason for the late access that was plausible and specific and delivered without hesitation. The guard checked something on his screen, nodded, waved them through. Amara had not said a word. The second checkpoint was the biometric, retinal scan, palm scan, both Ethan. She stood aside while he went through it. The system processed for 4 seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than it should have taken. She watched the light above the panel and did not look away. Green. The server room corridor was narrow and cold. Server facilities ran cold, always, with a hum that she felt more than heard, a constant low-frequency vibration that pressed against her eardrums. Ethan moved to the correct bank without hesitation, entered the 16-digit code at the terminal, and the interface opened. Talk me through what you're looking for, she said. There are 3 primary file groups, he said, already navigating. Financial, the movement structure, the subsidiary entities, the transfer records. Operational, the contracted unit, job authorizations, sign-offs. And personnel. He paused. The 3rd group is the one that has names. She stood beside him and watched the screen. The financial files first. Transaction records spanning 4 years. Routed through 7 subsidiary entities with clean-sounding names and no physical addresses. Amounts in the hundreds of millions, moving in patterns that were designed to look like ordinary operational transfers until you mapped the full sequence, at which point they formed something unmistakably deliberate. Then the operational files. Contracted unit records. Job authorizations. Sign-off chains. She read them quickly, methodically, the way she had been trained to process information under pressure. Not trying to absorb everything, identifying the load-bearing elements. The same unit name appearing repeatedly across different job authorizations, different years. A pattern of contracts, all authorized through the same internal channel. Hale's channel, and then the personnel files. She found her father's name in the 4th document. Marcus Brooks, contracted asset, Unit 7, status, terminated. She read the word terminated and understood, with complete and final clarity, that it did not mean his contract had ended. The authorization line below the status update carried a single name. Victor Hale. She stood in the cold corridor with the server hum pressing against her ears and looked at that name next to that word and felt something complete and heavy settle into place. Not resolution, not yet, but knowledge. The clean, irreversible kind. The kind that cannot be taken back or reframed. She had the answer her mother had never given her. She had the answer the USB drive had been holding in reserve. She had it in writing, in a file, with a name and a date and a signature. "Copy everything," she said. Her voice was steady. Ethan was already compiling the transfer to an encrypted drive. She reached into the duffel and pulled out the USB drive her father had given her when she was 12. She handed it to him without comment. He looked at it. He understood what it was. He inserted it into the secondary port. The transfer ran. 90 seconds. 100 seconds. The server room hummed. The corridor light was steady and cold. When the transfer completed, she pulled both drives and put them in separate pockets of the duffel. Not together, not in the same place, because her father had taught her that single points of failure were how everything went wrong. Ethan forwarded the core financial files to Claire Dawson as a compressed package, encrypted, with a single line of accompanying text. "This is the start. Hold until I give the word." Dawson's confirmation came back in under 2 minutes. Received. Holding. They moved to the exit. They were 20 feet from the main corridor when the monitor at the guard's desk lit up. All of the monitors at once. She could see it from down the hall. And a face appeared on the screen. A man in his 50s, lean, gray at the temples, with the particular settled quality of someone who had always been the most dangerous person in every room they had entered. Victor Hale. Not in the building. On screen. Remote access. He was looking directly into the camera above the guard's desk, which meant he was looking, functionally, directly at them. The guard stood up from his desk and reached for something. Amara was already moving. She covered the distance to the guard desk in 4 seconds, put herself between the guard and whatever he was reaching for, and spoke in a voice that was not aggressive but left absolutely no room for discussion. "Sit down. You don't want this." The guard froze. He looked at her face and sat down. On the monitor, Hale's expression had not changed. He was watching. He spoke, and his voice came through the desk speakers with the calm, unhurried quality of a man who believed time was on his side. "You should have died in that alley, Ethan," he said. Ethan stood at the corridor entrance and looked at the screen. He said nothing. Amara pulled the guard's network cable from the back of his monitor. The screen went dark. Then she moved to the main panel by the door and pulled the circuit that killed the external camera feed, the one she had noted on their way in. "Is there another exit?" she said. "Loading bay," Ethan said. He was already moving. She grabbed the duffel and followed. They hit the loading bay door at a run, crossed the outer yard through the opposite angle from how they had entered, and cleared the service gate before the external lights came back on. She heard them activate behind her, the floodlights catching the gravel yard and the empty space where they had been standing 10 seconds earlier. She did not stop moving. They ran 2 blocks, then walked. Heart rate up, breathing controlled. She kept the duffel tight against her side. She thought about Hale's face on that screen, the calm of it, the patience in it. He had been watching, probably had the facility under remote surveillance, probably had known the moment they entered, or close to it. He had let them complete the download. She understood why. "Let's get it," she said. "Yes," Ethan said. "Because he thinks he can take it from us before we use it." "Yes." She processed that. They had the data. They had the Dawson connection. They had 48 hours, now closer to 40 on the journalist clock. And Hale knew they had it and was coming. She looked at the drives in her duffel. Her father's USB alongside Ethan's compiled files. 2 sets of evidence, built years apart, converging in the pocket of a 17-year-old girl walking through the night city with the billionaire her father had once refused to betray. She thought about what Hale had said on the screen. "You should have died in that alley, Ethan." She thought about what he hadn't said. He didn't know, yet exactly what she had. He didn't know about her father's drive. He knew about Ethan's files. He didn't know that Amara Brooks, 7 years ago, had made a copy of everything he knew and handed it to his 12-year-old daughter and told her to wait for someone she trusted. That was the piece he hadn't accounted for. That was the thing that was going to matter. "We need somewhere safe until morning," she said. "I have one option," Ethan said. "Tell me." He told her. She thought about it for 4 seconds, assessed the risks, and nodded. They kept walking into the dark between the streetlights, carrying everything that was about to break open. The morning news found them before they found the news. Ethan's safe location had turned out to be a small, unremarkable apartment above a dry cleaning business on the Far East Side, rented under a separate identity, paid a year in advance, the kind of place that existed for exactly this kind of situation. The kind of contingency a man builds when he has spent enough years in a world where other people's interests don't always align with his survival. Amara had said nothing when he led her to it. She had assessed it, approved of the layout, and slept for 4 hours on the couch with the duffel under her feet and her hand wraps still in her jacket pocket. She woke at 6 to Ethan standing at the window with the secondary device in his hand, his face arranged into the particular stillness of someone reading something they had expected but still did not want to see. She sat up. What is it? He handed her the phone. The news coverage had shifted overnight. It had stopped being a missing person story. It was something else now, the kind of story that gets built by someone with resources and an interest in the narrative. 3 separate outlets were running versions of the same thread. Ethan Caldwell, mental health concerns, erratic behavior in the months before his disappearance. A source close to the company expressing worry. One outlet had a quote from Victor Hale, measured, sober, the language of a man reluctantly sharing information out of professional duty. We have been concerned about Ethan for some time. We hope he receives the help he needs. She read it twice. He's building the box, she said. Yes, Ethan said. If I surface now, anything I say reads as the claims of an unstable man. The evidence I have can be framed as fabricated. The journalist can be discredited by association. He looked out the window. He's been planning this longer than the attack. How long to fully establish it? Another day, maybe 2. Once the narrative is embedded in enough places, it becomes self-reinforcing. He paused. We needed the 48 hours. We may not have them. She thought about Claire Dawson holding the financial package. 40 hours had become closer to 30. Still enough, if nothing changed. Then her phone buzzed. She had turned it back on at dawn, briefly, to check. One message from Destiny. Amara, call me. Something happened near your building. She called. Destiny picked up on the first ring, voice low and urgent, the particular register of someone telling you something they're afraid to say. It came out in a rush. She had walked past Callaway Street that morning on her way to the transit stop, and there were 2 police cars outside the building, and she had asked a neighbor who said there had been an incident, a woman taken. Someone said it was a medical emergency, but the neighbor didn't believe that, because Amara stopped hearing the rest. She lowered the phone. The room was very quiet. The dry cleaning equipment hummed through the floor below. Outside, a bus rolled past. She picked the phone back up. Destiny, which neighbor told you? Mrs. Albright from the 2nd floor. She said your mom didn't come back last night. She ended the call. She sat very still for 3 seconds. The anger was there. Immediate, total. But underneath it, something else was moving. Something cold and functional that she recognized as the part of her training that existed for exactly this. Not to eliminate feeling. To hold it in one hand and keep the other hand free. Her mother had not come home. She had asked her to change her route. Her mother had agreed. But she had not said when. She had not confirmed it. And Amara had not pushed because she had been managing 17 other things and had told herself it was fine, that her mother moved normally and they wanted leverage, not damage. She had miscalculated. She looked at Ethan. They took her, she said. He did not pretend not to understand. He looked at her with something that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, but lived in the same neighborhood as both. I'm sorry, he said. And she knew from the way he said it that he meant it in a way that went beyond this moment. Meant it for all of it, for the full chain of events that had led from his choices years ago to her mother being gone from her building on a Tuesday morning. Don't, she said. Not harshly. Just clearly. Not right now. She stood up and moved to the window and stood where he had been standing and looked at the ordinary street below and thought. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered. No voice. A sound, movement, air, the ambient noise of an enclosed space. Then a woman's voice, steady and deliberate. The voice of someone choosing their words with great care because someone else was listening. I'm fine, her mother said. I'm not hurt. The line disconnected. Amara held the phone and breathed. She's fine. She's not hurt. Said the way you say things when you're telling someone the information that matters and nothing else because you don't know who is hearing it. Her mother was alive, unharmed, contained somewhere, and had managed to get 30 seconds on a phone that belonged to someone else. Her mother, who instinctively preferred booths with sight lines. Who had said some situations don't have clean endings and move forward anyway. Who had never explained the training gear under the bed or asked about the USB drive. Her mother, who knew far more than she had ever let on. A second message came through the same unknown number. Text only. An address. She showed it to Ethan. He looked at it for a long moment. I know that location, he said. What is it? Abandoned industrial processing facility. East of the freight district. His voice was careful. It's been inactive for years. It's the kind of place, he stopped. Say it. It's the kind of place where things happen that aren't meant to be found. She understood what he meant. She also understood something else. Something she had been turning over since the facility the previous night, since Hale's face on the monitor and the calm patience in his voice. He had let them take the data. He had watched them do it. And now he was offering them an address. He wanted them in one location. Controlled. Where he was the one with the variables. She could refuse. She could trigger Dawson now. Send a release signal on what had already been transferred, blow the story open with what they had, and let the public fallout do the work. That was the cleaner play, the safer play. But her mother was at that address. She put the phone in her pocket. "We go," she said. "Amara." It was the first time he had used her name. She registered that distantly. "We go," she said again, but not the way he expects. She spent 20 minutes on the plan, not because she needed 20 minutes, because she refused to go in with anything less than a full accounting of every variable she could control, every exit she could map, every advantage she could build in advance. Her father had not trained her to be brave. He had trained her to be thorough. Bravery without thoroughness was just a faster way to lose. Ethan triggered the full data release to Claire Dawson before they left. Not the partial package he had sent the previous night, but everything. Every financial file, every operational record, every personnel document, every authorization bearing Victor Hale's name. He wrote 3 sentences to accompany it. "Do not wait for my signal. Publish now. All of it." Dawson's response came back in 90 seconds. "Publishing in 1 hour." 1 hour. That was the clock. She transferred a copy of the compiled files, including the contents of Marcus's USB drive, to a second journalist contact she found in Ethan's secure directory, a man who covered financial crime for a national outlet. Belt and suspenders. 2 separate publications, 2 separate clocks, 2 separate sets of eyes on the same evidence. Hale could suppress one. He could not suppress both simultaneously. Then they moved. The facility was exactly what Ethan had described. A low, sprawling structure behind a chain-link perimeter, the kind of building that had once done something loud and industrial and now just sat in the freight district absorbing weather. The fencing was old but intact. The loading bay doors on the west face were rusted shut. The east entrance, a personnel door beside a dead floodlight, was the only access point that showed recent use. The frame was clean where the rust had been disturbed. She went in through the roof. There was a maintenance ladder on the north face, bolted to the concrete exterior that ran to a rooftop access hatch. She went up it quietly, tested the hatch, found it unlocked. Hale wanted them inside. He would have made sure of that, and dropped into the upper service level. A catwalk ran the full length of the building, 10 meters above the main floor, connected to the structural supports by rusted cable ties and the particular stubborn permanence of industrial construction. She crouched on the catwalk and looked down. The main floor was large, mostly empty. Old equipment in the corners, covered in years of dust. Fluorescent work lights had been set up recently. 3 of them, battery-powered, casting a pool of yellow light in the center of the floor. Her mother was in that light, seated, hands bound at her wrists in front of her, unhurt, as she had said, upright, composed, looking at the middle distance with the expression Amara recognized as the face her mother made when she was waiting for something she had already decided how to handle. For men in the room below, 2 near the entrance, 1 near her mother, 1 at the far end, near what had once been a processing station. Hale was not yet there. She mapped the positions, the sight lines, the distances. She identified the load-bearing supports she could use. She found the 2 shadow corridors, the areas not covered by any of the 4 men's direct sight lines simultaneously. Then she sent a single text to Ethan, who had entered through the East personnel door 2 minutes behind her according to the plan. 4. Mother Center. Hale not arrived. Wait for my signal. His response, understood. She moved along the catwalk. She came down through the shadows at the far end, using the old equipment frames as cover, and she was on the floor before any of the 4 men had registered anything had changed in the building. She crossed to the man nearest her mother in 4 quick, silent steps and was behind him before he turned. What happened in the next 40 seconds was not something she thought her way through in real time. It was executed the way deeply embedded things are executed, through the body rather than the mind, the product of years of cold mornings in a gym that smelled like rubber and chalk, of a man's voice saying again, slower, you're thinking about the end. 2 men down before the other 2 had fully located the source of the disruption. The third caught her movement and moved to intercept, and she redirected his own momentum against him, clean and efficient, the way water finds the low point without effort. The 4th backed toward the entrance. Ethan came through the door behind him. The man turned. Ethan, who was not a fighter, held his ground. The man made a calculation, a suit, middle-aged, visibly injured, and lunged. He did not account for the fact that Ethan had spent 3 days next to Amara Brooks and had paid close attention. Ethan stepped sideways and let the man's momentum carry him forward into the doorframe. The impact was sufficient. The man went down. Amara was already at her mother. She cut the binding at her mother's wrist with a utility blade from the duffel, and her mother stood up immediately, reached out, and put both hands on either side of her face the way she had done since she was a child. Checking, always checking, the reflexive assessment of a woman who had lived with the possibility of this kind of situation for a very long time. "I'm not hurt," Amara said. "I can see that," her mother said. Her voice was steady. Her hands dropped. She looked at Ethan, who had crossed the floor toward them, and something moved across her face. Recognition or something close to it. "Ethan Caldwell," she said. He stopped. Her mother looked at him for a long moment. "Marcus told me your name a long time ago," she said. "Not like this. I didn't picture it like this." He said nothing. There was nothing adequate to say, and he seemed to understand that. The main door opened. Victor Hale came in with 2 men behind him. He was exactly what Amara had expected and nothing more. A man in his 50s, lean and gray, moving through the space with the absolute settled confidence of someone who had been the most dangerous presence in the room for so many years that the posture had become structural. He looked at the 4 men on the floor. He looked at Ethan. He looked at Amara's mother, standing free. And then he looked at Amara. "You're Marcus Brooks' daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. "He was exceptional," Hale said. And she understood from the way he said it that he meant it. Not as flattery, not as manipulation, but as a simple operational fact. Her father had been exceptional. That was why his refusal had been a problem that needed solving. She felt the rage move through her like a clean electrical current. She did not act on it. "You should have stayed home," he said. "Like my father stayed buried," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, more like reassessment. He had expected grief, perhaps. Anger performed outward. He had not expected the stillness. He nodded to his 2 men, and they moved. What happened next was not clean. It was not the kind of fight that looks controlled from the outside. It was loud and close and physically costly, and the fluorescent work lights cast everything in a yellow wash that made it feel surreal, like something happening underwater. Hale's 2 men were better trained than the 4 who had been left to watch her mother. She registered that immediately. The first came at her with the specific efficiency of someone who had done this professionally, not the casual dismissiveness of the men in the alley. She did not dismiss him in return. She fought the way she had been taught to fight against a superior-sized and trained opponent. Not matching force with force, not trying to dominate, but disrupting. Interrupt the rhythm. Change the geometry. Make the fight happen in a different place than the one he planned for. She took a hit across the shoulder that she absorbed without breaking her own momentum and used a fraction of a second his follow-through created to change her angle entirely. Ethan was managing the second man, badly, honestly, taking more punishment than he was giving, but managing, which was all she needed. Her mother had picked up a length of steel pipe from the equipment at the edge of the floor and was watching the room with the same calibrated stillness that Amara now recognized as inherited rather than coincidental. She dropped her man. She turned. Hale had not moved from where he stood. He had watched the entire exchange with his hands in his jacket pockets, and his face had gone through the same reassessment process several times in the last 2 minutes, recalculating against a situation that kept being different than he had prepared for. She walked toward him. His hand came out of his pocket. She stopped. He was holding a phone, not a weapon. A phone, and on its screen she could see a financial interface, a transfer window, a number with a great many zeros. "Whatever Ethan gave the journalist," he said, "I can make it disappear. Source accounts emptied. Transaction records wiped. Your journalist runs a story with no supporting evidence, and it dies in 48 hours. He watched her face. "I can also make your life, and your mother's life, significantly easier than it currently is. In a material, permanent way." She looked at the screen. She looked at him. "My father begged before the end," Hale said. His voice was flat, informational. "I thought you should know that. He was exceptional, and he still begged." He paused. "You're better off making a practical decision." The room was very quiet. She thought about her father's voice. She thought about the gym and the rubber mats, and always see the second threat and the USB drive he had pressed in her 12-year-old hands, and the photo half hidden behind the class schedule, and 5 years of training alone in her room at night. Because the gym had closed, and you did not stop just because the conditions changed. She thought about what he had said to her. Not in the gym, not during training, but once in the car, on the way home from a session when she had asked him what the point of all of it was. "Control is the point," he had said. "Not control over other people. Control over yourself. You decide what you do. No one else gets that." She looked at Hale. She crossed the space between them in 3 steps, and took the phone out of his hand with a movement so precise and unhurried that he did not react until it was already done. She looked at the transfer screen. She closed the application. Then she hit him. Once, targeted to the knee, The lateral ligament, the specific point her father had shown her years ago as a non-lethal disabling strike. He went down hard. The phone clattered across the concrete floor. She stood over him. "You could kill me," he said from the floor. His voice was still controlled, even now. "You should. It's the only way this ends." She looked down at him. She thought about it. She was honest with herself in that moment. She did not pretend the thought wasn't there. She felt the full weight of what this man had done, to her father, to her family, to the others whose names were in those files, and she held it without flinching. And then she stepped back. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in a room you can't leave," she said. "That's worse." She picked up Hale's phone from the floor. She looked at it, then handed it to Ethan. "Make sure it gets to Dawson," she said. Ethan looked at her for a moment. Then he took the phone. The story broke at 7:42 in the morning. Claire Dawson's publication ran it first. The full package, financial records, operational files, authorization chains, names. The second outlet ran their version 11 minutes later. By 8:15, 3 more outlets had picked up the thread. By 9, it was the top item on every major news aggregator in the country. Victor Hale was arrested at 10:18 at a private airfield 12 miles from the city, attempting to board a chartered flight with documentation that turned out to be impeccable in every detail, except for the fact that the man whose name was on it had reported it stolen 3 years earlier. The agents who arrested him described him as cooperative. They said he walked to the car without resistance, which surprised some of them. It did not surprise Amara. Men like Hale did not break dramatically. They recalculated. He was already working out the next position, what he could offer, what he could trade, how to shape his cooperation into something that preserved some portion of what mattered to him. He would spend the rest of his life doing that, from progressively smaller rooms, and none of it would work the way he needed it to. She found all of this out later. In the immediate hours after the facility, she was occupied with other things. Her mother's name was Diane. Amara had not thought about this, had not thought about the fact that she had kept her mother nameless in her own mind throughout all of it, as if naming her would make her more breakable, more exposed. She understood now that this was exactly wrong. Her mother was not more breakable for having a name. Her mother, Diane Brooks, had raised a daughter alone for 5 years in the full knowledge that the world her husband had moved through was dangerous, had never disclosed more than was safe, had pressed a single firm hand over her daughters at a diner booth and said the long way home without flinching, and had sat bound and composed in a pool of industrial light waiting for a situation to resolve itself. Diane Brooks was not breakable. They sat in a hospital waiting area while Diane was examined. She was unhurt, as she had said, but protocol required it, and Amara sat in a plastic chair with a duffel at her feet and her head back against the wall and stared at the ceiling and let herself be still for the first time in 3 days. Ethan sat 2 chairs down. He had been treated for his ribs, 1 confirmed fracture, 2 bruised, and his eye, and the new damage from the facility. He looked like a man who had been through a significant amount in a short period, which he had. He did not fill the silence with anything. She appreciated that. "The files from my father's drive," she said, after a while. "What was on them?" "Everything," he said. Marcus documented the operation in full. Not just the job he refused, but the history of the unit, the chain of command, the clients, the authorization structure going back years. Names that weren't in my files. Operations I didn't know about. He paused. He built a complete record. He knew it would matter eventually, she said. Yes. She thought about a man who knew his days were numbered and spent whatever time he had building the cleanest possible record of what he had seen, then pressed it into a small metal drive and handed it to his 12-year-old daughter and trusted her to carry it until the right moment. She had carried it. "I want his name in the record," she said. "Not buried in a file. Named. What he refused to do, why he refused, what happened to him. He doesn't get to be a footnote. He won't be." Ethan said, "I'll make sure of it." She nodded once and looked back at the ceiling. Ethan held a press conference 4 days later. She did not watch it live. She heard about it afterward from Destiny, who sent her a long voice message that was about 60% genuine outrage and 40% impressed despite herself. Ethan had stood in front of cameras and answered questions for 2 hours, not from notes, not through a lawyer, and told the full story of Caldwell Technologies, of Victor Hale, of the operations that had run alongside the company, of his own complicity and the specific decisions he had made that had allowed it to persist. He named Marcus Brooks. He described what Marcus had refused to do and why. He said on record to every camera present, Marcus Brooks was a better man than the situation he was placed in, and he was eliminated for it, and I bear responsibility for the conditions that made that possible. The legal implications were, apparently, significant. The public reaction was complicated, which was the appropriate response to a complicated situation. Some people believed him. Some didn't. Some wanted his company dismantled. Some wanted him prosecuted alongside Hale. Some called him courageous. Some called him a man doing the minimum he owed after years of doing less. She thought most of those people were correct simultaneously. He resigned as CEO the following week. She heard about that afterward, too. 3 weeks later, Amara went back to school. The first day was strange. Not because anything had changed visibly. The hallways were the same. The lockers were the same. The fluorescent lights in the classroom still had the one unit in the third row that flickered slightly every 40 seconds, which she had always found calming in a way she couldn't fully explain. Destiny met her at the front entrance, and they walked in together, and Destiny did not ask questions, and that was exactly right. She had one new thing in her jacket pocket. A letter, folded, unsealed, delivered to her door the previous evening with no sender name and no return address. She had opened it carefully, half expecting anything. What she found was a single page and a typeface she didn't recognize, listing 4 names and 4 sets of dates. Below each name was a location. Below each location was the same phrase, still active. Not Hale, not the people already in custody. Something else, something that had been running parallel to what they had uncovered, connected by different threads to different corners of the same world. Someone was telling her it wasn't over. Someone who knew enough to know where she lived, who had thought she should know. She folded the letter back in her jacket and walked into school. In the afternoon, she went to the gym. It was a different gym from the one in her memory. That building had been converted into something else, a coffee shop or a co-working space, or one of the many things that filled the spaces left by what the city used to hold. This one was smaller, newer, less full of history. But the mats smelled right. The speed bag in the corner was intact without duct tape. She wrapped her hands in the changing room, the old way, left first then right, taking her time with it. She came out to the floor and stood in the center of it. She thought about her father. She did this without armor now, without the managed compartment she had kept it in for 5 years. She let it be real and present, missing him, being angry, being proud, being grateful for what he had left her in every form it had taken. The training, the drive, the discipline, the specific quality of stillness that she had watched skip a generation and land in her like something that had always been there waiting to be called. She thought about Hale, saying her father had begged. She thought about that, and she made a decision, standing on the gym floor in the afternoon light, that it didn't matter. Whatever those last moments had looked like, they did not change what her father had done. He had refused to eliminate someone who deserved to live. He had built a record that outlasted the people who tried to erase him. He had given his daughter everything she needed and trusted her to know what to do with it. He had been right. She took her stance. She breathed, in through the nose, out slow. She began. The combinations came up through her body from somewhere older than thought. The thing that stays with you when everything else is stripped away, the discipline that does not know how to leave once it has truly been learned. She moved through the familiar sequences and then beyond them, pushing the edges, adding speed, finding the limits of what she knew and pressing against them from the inside. She worked until the light through the high windows had gone gold and then blue. When she stopped, she was breathing hard and her shoulders ached, and she felt for the first time in 3 weeks like herself. Not unchanged. She was not unchanged. She knew that. She had learned enough about how things work to know that going through something real leaves marks that don't fully resolve. But herself, grounded in her own body and her own skill and her own understanding of what she was capable of. She sat down on the mat and looked at the letter in her jacket. For names. For locations. She thought about what came next. Some fights don't end, she heard her father say. His voice was clear. She had not heard it that clearly in years. You just get stronger for the next one. She folded the letter, put it back in her pocket. She got up. She went home. If the truth about someone you loved was buried by the very person you saved, could you still choose justice over revenge? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. We tell stories that don't let you go.